Welcome back everyone to a custom build that I will embark on here. This is the enclosure I'm going to be utilizing. This is a 36 by 36, so 36 tall, 36 long by 18 deep. So it has the same dimensions as a 40 gallon, which I'm used to working on, but it is much taller. You know, as you can see, it is a very tall tank. It's already got a lid with the screens, which is nice. It's easy to install MistKings on this, which is nice. I have a lot of MistKing equipment to use on this. And it's got this cool thing here if you want to put cords and stuff in. I've only used one of these for my arboreal salamanders, but I'm going to use this. This was not cheap. I think it was around $400. But I really wanted to do a big waterfall paludarium and, you know, to try to replicate something I saw in nature not too long ago. I'm not really sure how it's going to come out. I've already collected some materials, so I'm going to build this, and then I'll figure out what the best species to be housed in. Probably a lungless salamander species. I'm just not sure yet which one. Originally, I wanted long-tailed salamanders for my last enclosure, but they will not breed. Not that I'm trying to get them to breed, but if it happens, I don't want them to be in the wrong environment. It's because the last enclosure has no animals in it other than a cleanup crew, but there's no water feature in there, and so I have to figure out what I'm going to put in there, and so I'm just letting it cycle up. It's been about a month since I actually finished it, even though I only uploaded the video about a week ago. So I just need to kind of figure out what'll go in there, and then what I'm going to be able to put in here. This is going to be a big build, and one of the last ones I have room for, so before redoing other older ones. So I'm really excited about this one. The first thing I'm going to do is drill some holes in the glass. I will be utilizing one canister filter, a Fluval 207, which I use on most of my tanks. Again, because there's only about 20 to 30 gallons worth of water, probably not even that much that'll be in here. And so it's going to be way more than enough to filter that water. I'm also going to put some air stones in here, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that so you don't see tubing and things like that. But I want to keep this nice and aerated and the water clean, but I think one filter is sufficient. And so I am going to drill holes, and I will walk you through the tools I'm going to use for the holes like I usually do, and we'll get started. All right, so we are going to start with the drilling. I have these bulkheads that I usually use. They are, I'll show you here in a second. These are 1/2 inch bulkheads. So with that, I use a 1 1/4 inch diamond bit hole saw. That's what it's like. You just put it in into the drill. It's pretty simple. This is some duck seal putty or whatever the heck it's called. I forget the name of this stuff. I just will make a little circle and put that on the glass where I want to drill, fill it with water. I'll tape underneath so the glass doesn't fall through, and I will go ahead and drill my intake and return where I want it, because remember, my return, as I usually do on these, is going to be where the water cascades out. So to give you an idea, I'll show you here after I drill of where I place these, and I'll explain why. All right, well, what I'm doing here is a leak test. As you can see, I drilled the hole for the intake, for the return, where the waterfall will be. And I'm letting the water sit here. I'm not really worried about if water comes out of here, because I'm going to use plumber's tape. What I'm really trying to do is figure out the integrity of the bulkhead. And I'm not really worried about the return, because water's not going to be complete. It's not going to be submerging this. It's just going to be going through here. So it's not going to be an issue. So you don't have to really test that. This is where, there's usually an issue. And if there's an issue with the bulkhead, then, if it's a faulty bulkhead, you're going to see it leaking. I'm going to have to adjust this and take this thing out anyways to do the background. But what I'm doing here, so you can see it's leaking, but it's only leaking from where this elbow unit fits in here. And like I said, I haven't put plumber's tape on that, so it's not sealed. This isn't, I haven't tightened this all the way. What I'm really checking for is this leaking around this part, which it's not. So it's not a faulty bulkhead. So that's the big concern. So pretty good. This is the only, again, it's only leaking from this part, this is not, you know, if I tighten this down here, it's going to loosen the bulkhead. So what I typically do is when I put this in for the final time, I'll do 1/2 turn with a wrench and make sure this is really tight. And then while holding this with a wrench, I'll screw this thing in pretty tight as well with the plumber's tape, and then you're not going to see the leak from this part. The big thing is, you know, am I going to get a leak from the actual bulkhead, which I'm not. So, and again, if I was, what I would do is tighten this thing a little bit more, and usually that resolves it. But this is just hand tight right now, and I don't have any issues. So I think we're in pretty good shape. You know, I'll take the water out, and I'll show you some other things here. All right, now that we've got the leak test out of the way, let's talk about how we're going to plumb this thing. As I mentioned earlier, we will be using a Fluval 207 canister filter, which is good for 20 to 45 gallons of water. According to Fluval, I'm going to have probably about 25 to 30, so right in that sweet spot. It's powerful enough to create a nice waterfall effect. And I'm also going to have an air stone in each corner. I'm going to be utilizing the PVC pipe shown here, which I will silicone in the corners, and then I will thereby run an airline tube down each one. The airline tube will go through these holes here, as you can see in the lid, which Exo Terra conveniently makes, which is nice. It's nice and snug in there, and I'll be able to pull the airline tubes through these holes down through the PVC pipe, and then have them come out in the corners to make sure that the water is very well oxygenated and that it's constantly moving and there's no dead spots, because I really want to make sure there's clean water in this for the kind of species that I plan on putting in, or species, we'll see, but both need clean water. So that's the airline tube, just 1/4 inch airline tube. This is the air pump I'm going to use. As you can see, I can have 2 airline tubes hooked up to the pump, and I have the air stones there. Okay, so was able to silicone the PVC pipe in. I had to cut sections because they weren't long enough. They were only 24 inches or 2 feet. So I had to add sections on either side. It's about 2 inches down from the top on both sides and about 4 inches off the bottom. This is again where the airline tube will run for the air stones on either side of the tank. But with that being said, let's move on to cutting the A-crate light diffuser to start creating the background. All right, the next thing I did here was cut out a crate light diffuser plastic, and I siliconed it on the sides, the back, and on the bottom to evenly distribute weight of rocks and other things that I'm gonna have down there. As you can see there, I cut around the spots where the bulkheads will go, as you can see, up and down. Anyhow, this is got to dry and cure overnight probably, because it's later in the afternoon now. I'm just going to let this go, and then I am going to move on to the next steps, which will be to start foaming things in for the background, and I'll show you those materials. All right, everything is dried from the silicone in terms of the A-crate, and we're in good shape. One thing I did is I took some of this expanding foam and I sprayed it in between these voids behind and on the sides of the PVC pipe. I'm speaking from experience. I have had animals find these little holes and gaps in between these backgrounds I built and get back there. And I've had to tear these things apart to get the animals out because they couldn't figure out how to get back out. So I'm taking the time now to do the best job that I can to fill these holes and gaps everywhere as I continue to build the background. So let me start showing you some of the materials I'm going to use. Let's start with the driftwood in terms of materials. I'm not sure I'm going to use all this. There's some pretty big pieces here. You can't really tell, but I'm going to use quite a bit of it. And I have a friend who has a water in the backyard, a beach, and this stuff washes up all the time. So I clean it and dust it off and let it sit for a long time. This has been sitting about 4 months. So this is going to be the driftwood I use for this one. And let's talk a little bit about the rocks as well here. And here are the rocks I'll be using. These are, again, from my property out in the mountains. Quite a bit of rocks. I'm probably not going to use all of them. This is a ton of rocks, hundreds of pounds. And also some smaller rocks and some gravel from a creek there. So it'll look pretty good. As you can see, I've started on the background using some of the driftwood. It's laying on its back right now, so I'm standing over top of it. With the rocks, it has definitely been slow going. This is not easy. I've already gone through about 4 or 5 cans of foam, but it's looking pretty cool. It's going to be a waterfall cascading. It's going to drip through all this stuff. So I'm going to try to create a natural channel on the right side where it's still a little blank. So I'll use some foam and some rocks. What I'm also doing here, as you can see, this is the bulkhead. This is well, there's a little bit of foam on the end of that. I'll clean that off, but this is a little valve that I put on here that will make the water go both ways, so it can kind of cascade along the background. I'm not really sure how it's going to look until I test it, but got to do the background first. So anyhow, I'll keep working on the background and we'll show it to you when it's done. Okay, so where are we in this process building this thing? It's been about a week and a half. I've been working on it slowly, but it has not been that easy. It's been like playing Tetris. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that, but it's like piecing together a puzzle. And I'm still like maybe 50% way done with the background, not even the sides. Let me see if I can show you here. Yeah, and so this is what it looks like so far. As you can see, I've used a lot of the rocks. This thing's laying on its back, really heavy. I'm not gonna be able to do the entire thing on its back. It's just impossible. It's just really heavy, and I'm gonna have to do some creative stacking or something. Anyways, I put a lot of foam in, carved it with a wire brush drill bit, and also with a razor. I put some silicone, and then I used some Reptisoil and some dry coconut fiber. There's a couple areas that still need to touch up, waiting for that to dry up there in that corner. What I did though, want to do is get a lot of these bigger pieces in and get, most of the stuff on the high part of the, the top part of the background done. So what I'm going to do is work my way around the top on the sides and somehow figure it out. I'm going to use some driftwood. It's going to be mainly foam and things like that along the top. I'm not going to try to make this thing top heavy any more than it already is. So it'll look really cool, but as you can see, I'm starting to run out of rocks. So you can really go through, this is a ton of rocks in here already. It's very heavy. But if you really want to get a legit natural look, you can make your own stuff, but I really actually prefer doing this. I just think it looks cooler. I think plants and animals appreciate it more. My back doesn't appreciate it more when I lift this, but it's all good. So let me continue to work on this and I'll give you an update. Background's starting to take shape. Got the top part and the sides done. And I think it looks pretty good. I mixed, I carved the foam and then I smeared silicone, some Reptisoil mixed with some coconut fiber, and this is the result you get. I put some more little pieces of kind of rooty driftwood. I like the way it looks. I don't want to lose too much on the side, so I didn't build it out with rocks. Plus, it's just way too heavy. I'm going to have to put it on the stand now and build the rest from the bottom up. It's just way too heavy. I'm actually going to have to get someone to help me move it. And I'm going to put a bunch of rocks around where the water outtake is up there to disperse it. But I like the way it looks. It looks pretty cool. It is on a dolly, as you can see. It is super heavy, so it's the only way you can lift it off. So anyways, I'll continue to work on it and show you when the hardscape and background's done. The enclosure lifted on the stand, and I was able to fit those airline tubes with these air stones, as you can see, down the PVC pipe from the top. I had just enough tubing for either side, which is great. It will go directly into this air pump that you see right here. This is a pretty strong air pump, so that's great. Another important thing here that I want to note is that I put filter floss or filter pad in there, both on the bottom and the top of the PVC, to prevent any salamander from going down the PVC hole of death, because they don't know any better and they will go down there, I promise you. So always salamander proof your enclosures. Background is essentially complete. I opted not to stack rocks on the sides because it was just way too heavy and made this thing unstable. It's pretty high off the ground already on the stand, and I didn't want to put that much weight on this. I am going to build a lot of rocks up in the middle and some on the sides, but just have them stacked. As you can see, here's one of the air stones. I actually decided to foam in where the PVC pipe was, even though I had put the filter floss or filter pads in the PVC pipes. I actually just foamed them in. You can still access where the stone is and replace the stone if you need to. That's the intake down there. As you can see, here's the other one over here at the bottom. And so, I'm liking this. I'm going to plant this really heavily with moss and things and hope it grows on the cocoa fiber and the Reptisoil and the bark. And I'm going to put some other rocks up there, so hopefully everything grows. But I'm going to wipe this thing down with rubbing alcohol, and then I'm going to start with the substrate. Yep. This is Seachem Fluoride, and I have been at this for an hour and a half. Yep. an hour and a half I've been doing this, trying to get this sediment and stuff out. And you just, all you can keep doing is I have a little spade here, and I just keep spraying it and mixing it and trying to get it out, and it looks like toilet water. I mean, it's nasty. I mean, you really have to get the sediment out of this clay stuff. I mean, this is ridiculous. It takes forever. So not always fun, but you know, if you don't want to do 1,000 water changes, you gotta do 1,000 of these rinses, I guess. Okay, so 2 hours later, and it's still not perfect, but whatever. I like the product, don't like cleaning it. I'm going to spread a layer of this on the bottom in case I want some aquatic plants. Gonna have a lot of mosses. I'm just not sure if I'm gonna have plants, but I want to have this as a base substrate layer, so I'm gonna spread it around the bottom, and I'm gonna put the river rocks and pebbles on top of it, and I'm going to start building up the rest of the hardscape now. But I'm going to get this down first, and I will show you what it looks like. Well, what I'm starting to do here is the hardscape, and I'm trying to cover up these air stones. I don't want to really have much red showing. You're not going to see that in the back. But what I'm doing is I'm kind of strategically placing rocks where there's still area for the bubbles to get out to make sure that the water stays nice and oxygenated. I'm using all these river stones that I rinsed off, and here as well. You got a lot of big stones right there. We got a whole bunch of stuff. So again, like I said, I'm just trying to hide things, and I'm going to build it up a bit so it doesn't look, you know, there's going to be a lot of things planted like moss and liverworts and stuff. It's going to be everywhere, but I want to build the rocks up quite a bit too, just because it kind of looks, I don't know, I kind of stopped it again because of the, like I said, the weight and everything. So really just need this to look a little bit more realistic. But let's see what I can do here with the hardscaping skills, and I will show you what it looks like after I figure out a cool design. All right, well, this is what I ended up with. I'm kind of lukewarm right now. I like the way it looks on the bottom if you just look at the bottom half, and I like the way the top half looks. The middle just seems odd because there's no rocks or anything anywhere, but like I said, it was too lopsided. But anyways, that's the water intake, by the way, in there. I got to have access to that. And the air stones, I'll show you here in a minute. You'll see the little blue air stone in the corners, keep the water nice and oxygenated. I am going to plant a lot of moss and liverworts and brophytes type of flora in here, so I'm going to make it look good. I might add some more rocks. I just don't want to keep piling up rocks. I have more. I just think it's going to be way too heavy. But, you know, I think it looks good overall. I did put a rock up here by the waterfall to divert the water. I took the thing off that shoots the water on both sides. I think it was just too close to the sides and the foam, and it would have just not had the right effect that I wanted. So I'm just going to naturally divert the water. See, like how I just moved that, it'll just flow out. That's the return. Well, we'll see how the water spills out. I'm going to let this dry for a couple days and just kind of get nice and ready for a water test. But after that, we do the water test, we see the trickle effect, and I'll know where to plant the plants. And we'll go from there and see how realistic this thing looks. And I don't know, keep our fingers crossed that at the end of the day, this big project turns out all right. All right, so I let this sit for a couple days. I added the Nicrew lights, came in the mail, so I put those up. Those are on a timer. I think it's like 7 to 7 or maybe a little less time of light during the day. I also hooked up the filter, which is a Fluval 207. I hooked those up with the hoses that came in with some hose clamps to the elbow units that go into the bulkheads. And I will do a water test now, see how the water flows out, see where I want to plant stuff. Then the last step will be to put the lid on in the MistKing. All right, well, what I did was I actually added the double nozzle back, as I'll show you right here, that goes into the bulkhead. It was too splashy the other way. And I used some rocks to divert some of the water flow. It's still pretty splashy. I like the way it looks, but I think I'm gonna have to add more rocks up here to make it more of a trickling effect and less of a splashathon. Overall, it's pretty cool, but I think I have to play around with the rocks to get the flow right. And then I can start adding plants and getting the MistKing and everything else set up. So let's check it out. All right, let's talk about the plants. These are liverworts that I've been growing These are awesome. They've been growing in a container I have. I'm gonna use a lot of these in there, maybe not, if not all of them. I'm also gonna be using some of this aquatic moss here that I got from a stream on my property in the mountains. It doesn't look like much, but this stuff grows all over the rock, so I'm gonna try to replicate how I saw it growing in the mountains in the creek behind my house and see if I can get that going. And then I've got, this was also some moss that was growing on the kind of periphery of the creek. So I'm gonna plant some of this as well. I also have some other mosses I haven't shown you. I have about 10 huge bins full of moss that I've been propagating, so I might use some of that as well. All right, well, we got this thing planted. I got the MistKings installed, as you can see, and did a lot of finagling with the rocks and some of the mosses and liverworts in here to get the right drip effect, but I'm pretty happy with it. I'm hoping that the liverworts here that are on the side and the mosses will attach onto some of the driftwood, and I know there's a lot of coconut fiber and I have some reptisoil, so I'm hoping that they'll live, but we'll see. This is, you know, kind of a little bit of an experiment. I'm not going to stock this for a while. I want to make sure that the plants can take off. But it looks pretty cool so far. You know, it always looks cool when you first put it together. The real test is after about 6 months. So anyways, really like it. I think it looks pretty realistic. I think I was able to achieve kind of what I wanted to. We'll probably end up, when I do end up stocking it, probably with some lungless salamander species, maybe Desmognathus. That's like the dusky salamanders. There's lots of different kinds. But first, like I said, I want to make sure that these liverworts and aquatic mosses and the other moss can actually thrive in here and do well. And so we will see. I've got the air stones in either corner, remember, to keep the water in the back oxygenated. And, you know, I like it. It's a good drip effect, and hopefully these plants will take off. Time will tell. And so we'll probably have an update video at some point. But anyways, you know, happy with the way it turned out. And, you know, it was a long build, but well worth it. You know, in terms of the underwater part, I'm not going to put any plants in it just yet. I typically don't find plants in these streams that I find anyways, where I find a lot of these species that I'd like to put in here. So I'm going to just leave it the way it is. It's pretty clear. I might do another water change, but we'll see. But I think it looks pretty realistic. I really like the way that the shale and the pebbles that I got from the area where I have my property looks good. I like the driftwood that I have in there. Looks like roots, and really could see salamanders thriving. But as you can see, I put some plastic on top to try to retain some of the humidity. There's the reservoir right there for the MistKing. So anyways, I really appreciate everyone tuning in for this new build of mine, and I appreciate all the support. You know, if you haven't subscribed, comment, like, love hearing from everybody, and you know, looking forward to making some new content here in the new year. I want to wish everyone a happy holidays and happy new year, and stay safe and healthy.